As we have seen in the previous video on storing arrays, the ability to store multiple values under one identifier is a powerful one indeed. The 2D array takes this a step further. Let's imagine you want to create a chess game. You would need to store the position of every piece on the board. A chessboard contains 8 rows and 8 columns, meaning that there are 64 squares that could contain a piece. We know from our arrays video that creating 64 separate variables is not the best idea. We could create an array of 64 elements, however, when manipulating the pieces from one square to another, that would be difficult to do with a single list. We could create 8 arrays of 8 elements to represent each row. This is better, however the best way to do this would be to create a 2-dimensional array to store every piece with 8 rows and 8 columns. This video will show you how to create and manipulate 2D arrays in C#. To declare a 2D array, we do the following. Here I've created an array of integers called array nums. Notice that after the variable type, I've created the square brackets the same as we did with one-dimensional arrays, but we have put a comma in it. This is telling the code that we expect there to be 2 dimensions to this array instead of 1. In the second bracket, we declare that we would like the first dimension to contain 3 elements, and the second dimension to contain 4. Put simply, we have created 3 rows and 4 columns. Now let's add some values to this array. To help you understand how this works, I'll place an abstract representation of how these values are stored in the array on screen. First, we add a line of code that tells the computer to store the integer value of 5 to the array nums array at position 0, 0. Now we add the value 8 to row 2, column 1. This is an important thing to remember. The first number represents the row and the second represents the column. Next we'll add the value 4 to row 1, column 3. Now we'll update the value stored in position 0, 0 to the number 2. Note that as C# is a sequential programming language, the value stored at 0, 0 at the end of this list of commands will be 2 and not 5, because it runs each line in order from top to bottom. Outputting a value in a 2-dimensional array is the same as a 1-dimensional array. We simply use the console.writeLine command, we write the variable identifier, and what row and column we wish to output. As the value 8 is stored in row 2, column 1, it outputs the value of 8. We can even use an input into an array like so. In the previous video about arrays, we went through a method to loop through and check every element in an array using a for loop. This is also possible in 2D arrays using the following method. Here I have a 2D representation of a chessboard. Let's create a bit of code so we can print this chessboard to the screen. First we create a for loop to loop through every single row. As you can see, there are 8 rows, so I'm looping from row 0 to row 7. Now we nest a second loop inside the first. This second for loop will be used to loop through every column of our chessboard, from column 0 to column 7. Finally, we'll output every element using the chessboard identifier, along with using the row variable from the row loop and the column variable from the column loop. Let's visualize how this works step by step. First, the for loop starts at our row variable at row 0. Then our second for loop starts with our column variable at column 0. This second for loop is nested inside the first, so therefore it will complete all 8 column loops before the row loop even gets to its second loop. So starting from row 0, column 0, then column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4, column 5, column 6, and column 7. Now our column loop ends and the row loop iterates by 1. We are now on row 1. The column loop now starts at the beginning, column 0, column 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now row 2, column 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Row 3, column 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And the code continues like this until all rows and all columns are complete. Running this code will output this result. As you can see, every element in our 2D array is output to the screen, although not in a visually pleasing way, so let's fix that. What we can do is, after every column has been output, After the curly bracket, we will tell the computer to write a new line and change the original right line to a right. A right instead of a right line will not place a new line after each input. As you can see, all elements have been outputted into a grid format. Finally, let's add a pipe symbol to each column. And now we have a visually pleasing way to display each element. Let's really test our skills by completing some of these on-screen challenges. If you can do all 5 challenges without help, then let me know in the comments. If you have any questions, also let me know in the comments. If you would like to see step-by-step answers to these challenges, there will be a follow-on video which I will pin in the comments. If you learned something new from this video, or enjoyed it otherwise, please give this video a like and tap that subscribe button for more coding videos.